Greetings everyone. Today's Gospel reading, John chapter 2 verses 1 to 11, tells how Jesus turned water into wine at a wedding in Cana of Galilee. And this is referred to by John as the first sign, the first miracle, if you like, the first supernatural activity of Jesus, which was intended to lead people to place their faith in him. In John's Gospel, always any miracle is meant to be a sign pointing to Jesus, to his identity, and each miracle, each supernatural work that Jesus performs is intended to bring people to faith in Jesus as the Messiah. So a miracle would reveal his identity and would hopefully lead people to faith. And so we have the story of the first miracle, the turning of water into wine, at that wedding in Cana of Galilee. And Jesus and his family and his disciples probably were all at this wedding. Now, in first century Palestine, wedding feasts could last a whole week. They must have been a very expensive business. If you failed in terms of hospitality, if you did not cater correctly for the needs of your guests, that was not just considered a great embarrassment to the host, but it was more than that. It was a serious offense. The family had an obligation to provide a feast that met social requirements. And so there was great pressure. One had to provide adequately, and your reputation was at stake, and you needed to be generous, and you needed to provide good nourishment for people. The options in terms of liquid refreshment were really water and wine. No G&Ts, no whiskey and soda, no Castle Lager. On this occasion, the host either under-catered or the guests drank much more than expected. And so the host was in a very serious predicament. Mary, the mother of Jesus, realized that there was a shortage of wine, and she presumably knew that her son had the power to alter the situation, and so she said to Jesus, "They have no more wine." And it was a very pointed comment that she made. And Jesus' reply to Mary intimates that he understood that she was expecting him to intervene. "Dear woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come." It was not time yet for Jesus to be publicly revealed as the Messiah, because this would attract unnecessary attention and arouse hostility towards Jesus prematurely. Jesus wanted to be low-key at this stage of his ministry. And so it seems to be a fairly straightforward, a fairly harsh rebuff of Mary's comment. They have no more wine. They've run out, and they're in a difficult situation, and what are you going to do about it? It's interesting that this was the first of the signs of Jesus's supernatural nature. But Mary had confidence in her son's ability to do something in an impossible situation. How is it that Mary came to have this conviction? So when Jesus said, "Dear woman, why are you involving me? What has that got to do with me? My time has not yet come," Mary was not put off. She simply said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, if we did not think so highly of Mary, we might suspect a little manipulation, using her close relationship to Jesus to persuade him to do something to help the embarrassed host. But Mary knew that her son was easily moved with compassion, and that he was ready to meet genuine needs. And perhaps Mary was really hoping that Jesus would show his true mettle. Perhaps Mary was getting quite anxious that Jesus was not or had not been forthcoming, that he hadn't done a great deal to make people aware of who he was. And so Jesus told the servants to fill 6 stone water jars with water. 6 stone water jars that were used for the purification rituals that the Jews engaged in regularly. And these stone jars could possibly have been about a meter high. They were quite large and could contain a large volume of water. The total volume of water possibly was 545 to 818 litres in the 6 stone water jars. And there was a belief in Judea that using stone meant that the contents of the water jars would not become impure. And that was according to the law of Moses. If they had used pottery, then the water inside the water jars would have contaminated the pottery. So they believed, so that the pottery would have been tainted by the contents of it. Purification washing was a frequent religious activity. In the houses of the elite, both bathtubs for regular washing and ritual baths for purification rituals have been discovered. And of course, the primary purpose was spiritual cleansing. Something else to notice, it might not be of great consequence, but it's interesting that there were 6 stone water jars, and I have never really noticed that number before or thought there was any great significance in it. But of course, in the scriptures, 7 is meant to represent wholeness, completeness. And so we get the 7 days in a week and so on and so forth. 7 has great religious significance in the scriptures. And so 6 possibly indicates that the Jewish purification ritual was representative of a system that was inadequate. It was not complete. It was not the whole truth, that there was something missing. And so on this occasion, the wedding at Cana in Galilee, there was no magic, there was no prayer, there was no visible or audible spiritual activity. The servants were told by Jesus to draw some of the water out of one of the jars and take it to the master of the banquet. And the master of the banquet tasted it and discovered immediately that it was wine of a particularly fine vintage and delicate bouquet. And he was astonished. And so the master of the banquet hailed the bridegroom. "How come? Everybody else serves the good wine first, and when everybody has had enough to drink really and is a bit inebriated, then they serve plonk. But you have kept the best wine till now." And this is a kind of statement that rings in our ears. You have kept the best wine until now. And that, of course, is true of what God has done in sending Jesus. God has kept the best wine till now. The author comments, "This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed in Cana of Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him." The miracle was not for dramatic effect. It was a sign revealing the identity of Jesus. And as I said before, the intention was to elicit a faith response. And the intention was that that faith response should culminate in discipleship. And apparently on that occasion, it had the desired effect. The disciples placed their faith in Jesus. And in addition to the great supernatural activity of Jesus at that wedding, having the effect that Jesus intended, drawing people to faith in him, it also averted a major disaster on the part of the host, who was saved from public disgrace. What the story really says. Jews believed that they became ceremonially defiled during the course of their ordinary lives, and they were cleansed outwardly by having water poured over their hands. The ancient sacrificial system, relying on rituals that touched only the external and could not cleanse the conscience. The ancient sacrificial system was full of imperfections. It was inadequate. It could not cleanse one inwardly. And engaging in the ritual did not signify any kind of heart longing for new life or a desperate desire for transformation. It was simply doing something outwardly that became a habit. And rituals, if they are empty of sincere desire and heart intention for something deeper, rituals are fairly meaningless. Jesus was going to offer new spiritual power through his blood shed on the cross. Jesus offers a superior quality of life, a superior religion, a life of faith and worship lived by the Spirit. And Jesus came to liberate the Jews and to liberate the Gentiles and to liberate you and me from empty, ineffectual, outdated rituals. It is not what we do outwardly that counts ultimately. It's really what God does in us. And God is able to do in us effective work by his Spirit if our desire is for that work to take place. Now, in our lives, we often find ourselves in a situation where we have no more wine. It seems as though we've run out of steam, of everything that gives us life and vitality and causes us to be energized and motivated. It's not that the cellar is empty because we have overindulged over the festive season, but our resources are often depleted. We have no more wine. We've run out. We have no inherent strength to save ourselves from our predicament, to save ourselves from our from being overwhelmed by life and the pressures of life and the expectations of people and the sense of being inadequate and so on. And we need then the spiritual power and life that is given us through the Holy Spirit. And of course, that is contingent upon Jesus dying on the cross of Calvary. That death on the cross of Calvary somehow releases the floodgates of heaven, and so God's Spirit is poured out on all flesh at Pentecost. We need new wine, the wine of the Spirit, which comes because of the death of Jesus on the cross. Jesus did not aim to win favor by helping an embarrassed host. And he did not want to just simply dance to his mother's music and conform to her expectations. Jesus decided how he was going to act and what he was going to do for his own reasons. His primary concern was not the physical comfort of the guests and their ongoing refreshment through an increased supply of wine. Wine lavishly provided and freely offered is an appropriate symbol of the salvation made possible by the death of Jesus. The water in the 6 stone water jars is transformed into wine. A living relationship replaces lifeless ritual. Doing the right thing, following the expected pattern, going round and round the mulberry bush, the endless cycle of trying to get free from sin. Pack it in. Have done with it. There's no point in ritual if it is empty, if it is meaningless, if it accomplishes nothing, if we are mindlessly engaging in some activity. thinking perhaps that it automatically will bring some relief, some transformation, some release, some change, something new. Believe in who Jesus is. Believe in what Jesus has done. Like the water in the jars, it seems that John is saying, be transformed. Become something completely new. Paul tells us, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. We need new vision. We need new attitudes. We need a new way of seeing things. In Revelation, Jesus says, behold, I make all things new. The one seated on the throne says these words, I make everything new. It is his work to make us new. It is his work to cleanse us inwardly. It is his work to revive us through his Spirit. And we simply cooperate. Ditching the distorted worldview and and values of the world. When we are transformed, when the water has become wine, God can then use us to transform the society of which we are part. A new age has dawned. That's the huge statement at the beginning of John's Gospel, chapter 2, with the turning of the water into wine. Although, of course, the death of Jesus hasn't happened yet, Jesus is saying in that miracle, there is something new coming, a new era is dawning. There is something limited, something incomplete, something empty about this ritual of outward cleansing. Wait for it. There is something superior coming which will be effective and will usher us into new life. And with this new wine that God offers us, God's presence will be evident in our lives, and we'll be more alive and more compassionate and more loving and more focused, and we'll be holy and devout and high principled, and we'll be free and spontaneous and fulfilled. Ritual will continue to have a place in our lives, but it will have its proper place. And ritual will signify something that is deeper and that is meaningful. It will not be empty. It will not be something in which we engage because generations before us have engaged in that ritual. And I think one of the things that COVID has done is perhaps to set us free from ritual, to set us free from engaging in the same old, week by week. And we've had to, certainly for many months, we were without the opportunity to have the bread and wine in our homes unless we had them anyway, and ate the bread and drank the wine symbolically, remembering the Last Supper and the communion that Jesus instituted. But although we could watch services on YouTube, and we could, by means of Zoom, be part of services where there was liturgy and ritual and perhaps Holy Communion, we weren't engaged in the normal practices of kneeling and bowing and processing up the aisle and standing and sitting and all those postures and gestures and so on that are part of our ritual. And so what has happened during COVID has served to remind us of the fact that what we do needs to be filled with meaning, and that we're not supposed to be just kind of doing stuff parrot fashion. And perhaps liturgy and ritual and postures and gestures have taken on new meaning if we have, after months of not being together in church, we've gone back and suddenly we're part of that again and discovered new meaning in it, perhaps. And so the miracle of the changing of water into wine is a wonderful occasion where God's glory is revealed, and there is a hint at the Holy Communion that Jesus was going to institute in the Last Supper, and the wine, of course, in the story of the turning of water into wine. The wine always, of course, reminds us of blood, the blood of Christ, and so perhaps it's a hint at the change that was going to come about when Jesus gave his life on the cross. His blood was shed in order that we might have new wine. So in conclusion, today, I hope that that this year you will be able to experience the freedom, the wonder of new life, the joy of being filled with new wine, the joy of being released from empty rituals, the joy of the fact that what you do has real meaning. I am so relieved that we're not still expected to engage in all these rituals which focus on outward cleansing, as though there would automatically be inward cleansing as well. I'm so grateful that we're released from all sorts of things that focused on the externals, and I'm so grateful for the wine of God's Spirit and for this new dispensation in which we live. And we should glory in the freedom that we have as God's children to enjoy the new wine of God's presence, the new wine of God's Spirit, the new wine of God's love, knowing that we are cleansed and sanctified and holy and worthy and liberated and full of God's love and delight. May God bless you today and right through this year that is still fairly new. Amen, and take care.